So let's talk about what we mean by speech act. Essentially, the action that a speaker performs through their utterance is called a speech act. It's a way of describing what we are doing when we speak, not just the words themselves, but the purpose behind them. For example, when I say, "I'll be there at 6, what am I doing? I'm actually making a promise, so the speech act here is promising. We use this term to include a variety of actions like requesting, commanding, questioning, or informing. Each of these represents a different kind of communicative act, and understanding this helps us see language as something more than just words. It's about the actions we perform through speaking. This idea is fundamental, as it ties into the overall theme of how language functions in social interactions. Let's take a closer look at how structures and functions work together in language. On the left, we have different types of sentence structures like questions, commands, and statements. For example, "Did you eat the pizza?" is a question which we call an interrogative structure. These are used to seek information. Then there's "Eat the pizza, please," a command or request known as an imperative structure. And finally, "You ate the pizza," a simple statement which is a declarative structure. Now, on the right, we see how these structures serve different functions through speech acts. Interrogative structures are used for questions, to gather information. Imperative structures serve to give commands or make requests, and declarative structures are used to make statements or share information. This slide also introduces the idea of direct and indirect speech acts. When we speak, sometimes our intentions are clear and direct, like asking a question or giving a command. Other times, they're more subtle or indirect, like hinting or implying something without stating it outright. Understanding these connections helps us see how language isn't just about the words we use, but about the intentions behind them. It's a key part of how we communicate effectively in different contexts. When we talk about speech acts, it's important to understand the relationship between structure and function. When a specific structure is used together with its corresponding function, we call it a direct speech act. For example, if I ask a question using an interrogative structure like "Did you?" or "Are they?" or "Can we?" and the purpose of that structure is to inquire or seek information, then that is classified as a direct speech act. This concept helps us see how language functions in real conversation, connecting the form we use with what we intend to accomplish. It's a straightforward way to understand communication, because the structure directly matches the speaker's intention. Now, it's also useful to compare this with indirect speech acts, where the structure might not seem to match the function so directly, but we'll explore that in the next slide. For now, remember that direct speech acts are all about clear, direct use of language to achieve specific communicative goals. Whenever we use a structure to perform a function that's different from its usual or literal function, we call that an indirect speech act. For example, when someone says, "Can you pass the salt?" they're not literally asking if you have the ability to pass the salt. Instead, they're making a request for you to do so. This is a key concept because it shows how language can be used to go beyond just conveying information. It highlights the difference between direct and indirect speech acts. Direct speech acts are straightforward, like saying, "Pass the salt." But indirect speech acts, like the question example, are more nuanced and rely on context and shared understanding. Understanding these distinctions helps us see how people communicate intentions and perform actions through language, not just through words, but through how they structure those words. It's an important part of understanding pragmatics and how meaning is conveyed in real conversations. Now let's look at the difference between direct and indirect speech acts, using the example, "You left the door open." When it's a direct speech act, it's a straightforward statement. The structure is declarative, and its primary function is to make a statement. It's simply telling someone what happened. However, the same sentence can also serve as an indirect speech act. In this case, even though the structure remains declarative, the function shifts. Instead of just stating a fact, it can be a request or a command, like asking someone to close the door without explicitly saying so. This highlights a key point. Direct speech acts are clear and explicit, whereas indirect speech acts rely on context and shared understanding to convey a different intention. Recognizing this distinction is crucial because it affects how we interpret and respond to what others say. Throughout this presentation, we've been exploring how language can serve multiple functions depending on context, tone, and intent. Understanding these nuances helps us communicate more effectively and interpret others' messages accurately.